Social responsibility of corporation has been a question for academics and business executives since the beginning of the 1950s. But it actually has a much older history. The underlying concept of CSR, that of an implied social contact between business and society, dates back to the writings of Greek philosopher Epictetus in the first half of the 17th century. In India, the concept of a corporation or an entrepreneur having a social responsibility towards his community has come a long way since the rise of mercantilism. The pre-industrial era expected mercantile traders to take care for not only themselves but also for members of their guild, the poor and other needy communities. With the advent of industrialization, the global trade scene witnessed the emergence of corporations as distinct legal entities that function solely on a profit maximization motive, and rejected the proposition that business was responsible for states' social welfare. The post-liberalization period expects business to adopt the triple bottom line approach as an inseparable part of their strategy to attain both shareholders as well as social value. This lesson unfolds the evolution of corporate social responsibility as a subject of theoretical and practical importance. It follows from the previous slide that after studying this lesson, we would be able to explore the origin and growth of CSR in India, understand the theoretical frameworks and generations of CSR, examine the contemporary CSR approach adopted by businesses, and analyze the drivers of CSR in the present scenario. History of CSR in India can be divided into three periods: ancient period, pre-independence period, and post-independence period. During ancient period, the CSR was shown explicitly only through steps like merchants pouring their charity in form of building wells, developing gardens, etc. The time passed and the pre-independence period started. Business families started to support education and health facilities. During the advancement made during the post-independence period, businessmen started getting responsible towards consumers, communities, shareholders, and other businesses and the state. Year 1991 left an inedible mark in the Indian history. It was the year when the then revolutionary finance minister Dr. Manmohan Singh brought the industrial policy supporting liberalization, privatization, and globalization in India. As a result, the consequent economic reforms brought rapid and sustained improvement in the quality of life of Indians. Though the development was fast, India lagged behind many MDG targets. Issues like developing ethical and responsible workplace, marketplace, and environmental practices to develop sustainable business started gaining attention. With time passing and environmental depletion increasing every day, the fears of global warming, exhaustion of natural resources, etc. increasingly started urging the corporate world to take social initiative with a new perspective. In the past few years, some surveys have been conducted in India by different organizations to understand the perception of CSR among companies and their different stakeholders, and to define the drivers and barriers of CSR in India. According to the results, 4 models of CSR coexist in India, namely the ethical model, as suggested by Mahatma Gandhi, where companies voluntarily commit to public welfare and participate in nation building; the statist model, propounded by Jawaharlal Nehru, which calls for responsible practices by state interventions in economic activities and protecting stakeholders through legislation; the liberal model propounded by Milton Friedman, which discusses CSR being limited to private owners or shareholders; and stakeholders model championed by R. Edward Freeman, which calls for companies to respond to all stakeholder needs. Since the second half of the 20th century, a long debate on corporate social responsibility has been taking place. Different analysts come with different theories about CSR. Let us start with the fundamentalist theory propounded by Milton Friedman. Friedman's position is captured to his pronouncement that there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources engaged in activities designed to increase its profit as long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition, without deception or fraud. Then came the social contract theory. The central tenet of this theory is that society consists of a series of explicit and implicit contracts between individuals, organizations, and institutions. These contracts evolved so that exchanges could be made between parties in an environment of trust and harmony. According to social contract theory, corporations or organizations enter into these contracts with other members of society and receive resources, goods, and societal approval to operate in exchange of good behavior. Social justice theory focuses on fairness and distributive justice. Proponents of theory argue that a fair society is one in which the needs of all members of societies are considered, not just those with power and wealth. As a result, corporate managers need to consider how these goods can be most appropriately distributed in the society. Rights theory is concerned with the meaning of rights, including basic human rights and property rights. One argument in right theory is that property rights should not override human rights. This means that while shareholders of a corporation have a certain property rights, this does not give them license to override the basic human rights of employees, local community members, and other stakeholders. Deontological theory deals with the belief that everyone, including corporate managers, has a moral duty to treat everyone else with respect, including listening and considering their needs. This is sometimes referred to as the golden rule. Stakeholder theory suggests that it is in the company's own best economic interest to work in this direction, because doing so will strengthen its relationship with stakeholders, which in turn will help the company meet its business objective. Trusteeship theory was propounded and popularized by Mahatma Gandhi. His idea of trusteeship was founded on his religious belief that everything belonged to God and was from God. If people could imbibe this principle in general, trusteeship would become a legalized institution. One way to view corporate social responsibility is through Carroll's pyramid. Carroll views the total social responsibility of business as involving the simultaneous fulfillment of four responsibilities, which stated in pragmatic terms means that the corporation should strive to make a profit, obey the law, be ethical, and be a good corporate citizen. More recently, Carroll attempted to incorporate the notion of stakeholders. Economic responsibility contains to do what is required by global capitalism. Legal responsibility holds that companies do what is required by global stakeholders. Ethical responsibility means to do what is expected by global stakeholders, and philanthropic responsibility means to do what is desired by global stakeholders. Based on the changing relationship between business and society, Simon Sinek describes the development of CSR broadly in terms of three generations. The first generation of CSR showed companies can be responsible in ways that do not detract from and may contribute to commercial success. Companies out of their own free will contribute towards charity of corporate philanthropy to address a variety of social, economic, and other issues. The second generation of CSR is where companies and entire industries see it as an integral part of long-term business strategy. Currently, many companies, because of the intellectual capital undergoing change within the organization, are taking CSR seriously and are moving towards. The third generation of CSR makes significant contribution to addressing poverty, exclusion, and environmental degradation. This generation goes beyond voluntary approaches by individual companies and involves leadership companies and organizations influencing the market in which they operate, and how it is regulated to remold entire market towards sustainability. Now let us check our progress. Do we know if the sentences written here are true or false? Merchant charity is still prevalent in unorganized sectors. Merchant charity is still prevalent in unorganized sectors. The main objective of economic reforms was developing competitive industries. The main objective of economic reforms was developing competitive industries. Creation of trust limits CSR to community development only. Creation of trust limits CSR to community development only. CSR is compulsion for every company. CSR is a compulsion for every company. Friedman's theory says that business is responsible for making profits and serving the community. Friedman's theory says that business is responsible for making profits and serving the community. Now let us cross-check our answers. The first statement, that is merchant charity is still prevalent in unorganized sector, is true. The main objective of economic reforms was developing competitive industries, is false. Statement 3. Creation of trust limits CSR to community development only, is true. CSR is a compulsion for every company. This statement is false. Friedman's theory says that business is responsible for making profits and serving the community. This statement again is false. Before we come to end, let us revise what we've studied so far. In an open market economy, as a result of significant reduction in government spending on social welfare, public policy makers expect greater social involvement from corporations. The Indian model of CSR commenced with philanthropy addressing social development issues which primarily were driven with religious sentiments, family traditions, and voluntary contributions driven by personal motives. With change in business environment and introduction of liberalization, the giving attitude of philanthropy started getting integrated into strategic thinking. Despite the development of Indian CSR from its initial philanthropic focus, there are still cultural influences to modern CSR. The public's expectations from business are growing. Indians by and large feel that the business sector must play a wider and more expansive societal role. In addition to providing good quality products at reasonable prices, companies should strive to govern their companies by adopting ethical practices, make their operations environmentally sound, adhere to high labor standards, reduce human rights abuse, and mitigate poverty. Thank you.